Aloha. Welcome to the 41st Annual Hawaii International Film Festival presented by Holly Kalani and our discussion with Greg Mitchell, Director of Atomic Cover-Up. We would like to extend our thanks to Honolulu Civil Beat for sponsoring this program and in our documentary panorama section. My name is Anderson Lay, and I'm the Artistic Director for the festival. I'd like to give a quick land acknowledgement, acknowledging Hawaii as an indigenous space whose original people are today identified as Kanaka Maoli or Native Hawaiians. Some quick housekeeping bits regarding programming updates. For up-to-date information on additions to our program and the full schedule of films, events, HIFF Talk story sessions, and Q&As, visit our website at hiff.org, hiff.org. Regarding audience awards, to participate in our Hawaii News Now Audience Award voting, please cast your vote via ballot in theaters or online at watch.hiff.org or on our apps by voting with the 5 stars on the films page. Vote for your favorite narrative, documentary, and short films. Mahalo to Hawaii News Now for their support. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Director Greg Mitchell. Hi, Greg.
Hi, very happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Atomic Cover-Up. Wow, what a film. Let me start off with that. Just you are a historian, a filmmaker, and also an author of books. You've authored many books, and also like with Atomic Cover-Up. Just kind of walk through the fact that this was, in a sense, over 3 decades in the making, with kind of exposing this, this major kind of. Not only the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also the cover-up from the American government regarding that and the coverage of that. Can you just talk about kind of your 3-decade journey, telling the story?
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I've written many books. I've also been the editor of national magazines. It happened that in 1982, at the height of the anti-nuclear movement, the Freeze campaign, as it was also known in the 1980s. I was named the editor of a magazine called Nuclear Times, which was sort of the Bible of the anti-nuclear movement. And through that, to try to make a long story short, I was exposed to this subject. I was able to meet one of the 2 leading staffers of who shot the footage in Hiroshima and Nagasaki for the American military. Soon after that, I interviewed and received documents from the real director of that project. And then that also got me into the Japanese newsreel team, which shot their footage actually before the Americans got there. And have stuck with this subject, writing about it briefly in 2 books. I did a whole book called Atomic Cover-Up a few years ago. People might want to check out on the subject. And then finally got to start working on this film a couple of years ago. But in a nutshell, the story is that immediately after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, elite Japanese newsreel team went into the 2 cities, risked their lives, the cameramen, to go into the 2 cities, and the footage they shot, which was all black and white, was then seized by the Americans when they arrived, and eventually was sent to the U.S. and was buried for decades. Nobody saw it. The Americans then started shooting their own footage in color. It's the only color footage that was shot there, again by an elite American military team, who also hired, kind of amazingly, a Japanese man who had worked in Hollywood named Harry Mamura, who actually shot Akira Kurosawa's first film, feature film. So I had pretty good credentials, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so he shot much of the color footage. But then when that was sent back to the U.S., it was suppressed for decades and nobody saw it. And one of the leading characters in my movie, Herb Sasan, who became a good friend, tried for decades to get it out, to find it, to make use of it, to make kind of an anti-nuclear film showing the true effects of what happened to people in Hiroshima and in America, and even in much of the world. To that point, people had only seen sort of grainy black and white photos of rubble and landscape and buildings that were blown out and things like that. And so what was hidden to Americans for decades really was the true human cost of the bombings. And it really took until decades later for that full story to come out. And my film has now made use of well, made use possibly of all that footage, but much of the footage in my film has never been seen before. And again, much of it is shown in 4K for the first time. So there will be some images that you have seen over the years, probably, but you've never seen it like this in the kind of quality. Um, so I think this film is unique because there have been dozens of documentaries about the bomb and about building the bomb and dropping the bomb and nuclear arms race and so forth. But there's never been one that really focused on the perspective of filmmakers and cameramen, people who shot footage, and what their response was then and later, and what happened to their footage. So it's whatever else you can say about it, there's never been a film like this because of the focus on the people shooting the footage and then what happened to this footage in the decades after.
I mean, what do you think was obviously, the American military was sending out cameramen to basically document everything. Was it originally intended to be for like newsreels, and then when they saw the footage, like, oh my God, this is not something that should be released? Or is it just for pure documentation? What do you think the original intent was?
Well, the American mission was basically to document in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and other Japanese cities the effects of the air war,
Mm-hmm.
which of course was mainly conventional, except for those two unfortunate cities.
Right.
So that was the thing: document the air war for future wars, I guess, for future weaponry and bombs
Mm-hmm.
and bombers and so forth. So as part of that, they went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki for several weeks, and they were kind of shaken by what they saw there because were not prepared, because there was already a cover up to deny Americans the full story. So they got there and said, we have to show what really happened here, and we have to show what happened to the people. And there are so many survivors still suffering in hospitals and so forth. So their focus became not the conventional bombing, but what happened to the victims of the bombing. So because there was so much of that in the footage, the Americans then said, we can't really show this. They did make use of that and the Japanese footage for medical studies. So again, it's sort of the feeling that, I went to Hiroshima. I was kind of a rare thing. I went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki for a month back in the 1980s, which was very unusual. Most people kind of jet in and jet out. And I was there for a full month, and I kept hearing from the survivors and from the journalists there about how the survivors felt like guinea pigs, and studied by doctors, but not really. The American doctors did not really treat them. And so they were, some would say the whole bombing was a experiment. That's a word that sometimes is used, nuclear experiment. But certainly the people who were victimized by it felt sort of like guinea pigs in this new era. And so some of the footage was sent to medical experts, and they studied the injuries, studied what happened to people, but not with the aim of then showing Americans, what had actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Was that initial trip in the 80s, was that initially to start research for the eventual atomic cover-up book? Was that the?
Well, I was still at nuclear. I was still editing Nuclear Times at the time. I did my trip. I then came back and wrote articles for the New York Times and the Washington Post, and dozens of publications. I then, a few years later, co-wrote a book with Robert J. Lifton, the famous writer, called Hiroshima in America, which is about how Americans responded to the bombings in the 1940s and 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I wrote a book last year that's it's a little different, but also about a film cover-up about when MGM movie studio made the first movie about the atomic bomb in 1947.
Right.
They originally set out again to make kind of a statement against the bomb, and after the intervention of the Truman White House and the Pentagon, it became a pro-bomb propaganda drama.
Right. What was the title of that book?
The Beginning or the End. That's the name of the MGM movie. It's the same
Okay.
title as the MGM movie, The Beginning or the End.
Mm-hmm.
So you might say it's the same, in a way, the same time period as the
Mm-hmm.
cover-up of this documentary footage.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood, and it was also in a way covering up in a major drama. So
Right.
to me, they're linked books,
Right.
quite different tone. But anyway, so that's, I don't know, I wouldn't call it an obsession, but it's certainly a subject that I've kept after for all these years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the fact that it took so long to basically get this film made, was it just because of, I mean, obviously, was it through the Freedom of Information Act, or was there embargoes that were lifted? What was the, I mean, why did it take so long? I mean, aside from the obvious cover up.
Yeah, the footage by 1982, when I got more interested in the subject, had been declassified. It was no longer secret. So
Right.
it was by then sitting in the National Archives. Now most people didn't know about it.
Right.
Some people have said it was just as good, it might just as well have been classified because nobody knew it was there.
Yeah.
So when I wrote my first major article about this, it kind of alerted people that this footage was there, and it has been used in small bits
Mm-hmm.
ever since then in some documentaries. I mean, I would
Yeah.
never claim this is the first time any of this footage has appeared anywhere, but it's never appeared at this length and with this context where you're hearing the stories of the filmmakers about the footage, and then about trying to get it used later. And I mean, I think some people may be wary of, well, do I really want to watch this film? It's probably pretty grisly, or it's probably going to hit you over the head or something. I'd like to think that it's more subtle, that it's more artful.
Yeah.
I think there's some great music. It's very atmospheric. It's certainly, there are graphic images, but nowhere near as graphic as maybe the subject calls for. So I think that it's it's not that hard to watch and take in and appreciate, and because I think the tone is more sorrowful, I guess, than
Right.
didactic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's not it's not didactic. It's not, how should I say, like, in the sense, what's okay. Let's talk about you. That's a good word, that the keyword to use is atmospheric, right? So let's talk about kind of like the kind of like the tone and the kind of basically the artistry of how you want to tell the story. I mean, like, what's great is, aside from the, like, first of all, we'll talk a little bit about the 4K process, right? Of putting it, but just using the, not testimonials, or not testimonials is the wrong word, but like their own words from the photographers, or from the, the documentarians, and then having that kind of like voiceover with the image and whatnot. So, because that really brought in kind of their humanity, to it, their POV. How did you find those, like, writings, for example, and then, like, also, obviously, casting the right people to act out those those segments as well?
Yeah. Well, the two American leaders were people I interviewed myself, and so I had a lot of transcripts on what they had said and so forth. The Japanese filmmakers, some of them, I mean, a lot of them became sort of prominent afterwards in the film industry or the news industry, and some of them did memoirs, and some of them did other accounts, oral histories, and things like that. So I had some of these, the key parts translated into English for the first time. So, while these are fairly prominent people, some of them in Japan, their words have never appeared in the U.S.
Right.
They've always been One of my, and some of this is due to one of the advisors for my film is Marcus Nornes, who's a film professor at the University of Michigan, who's the leading authority in America on the black and white Japanese footage.
Mm.
He's written a major book on that. He goes to Japan all the time, and the film things there and everything. So he is a leading authority on the black and white footage. So thanks to him, I was able to get at some of these memoirs, and I got them translated. So that was exciting to get the word of the Japanese. I mean, the film really is about equally divided between the Japanese and the American.
This is what's great. It's very balanced. I like that very much.
Yeah. So, and of course, they got. I guess it was good. It's good for the story, but they got brought together because the same man who I interviewed, McGovern, the American, was put in charge of kind of handling the Japanese footage. So you kind of had these two separate projects, but they ended up in one place with one man. So the Japanese story then becomes very much a part of the American story and the cover up in America. So in that sense, it was kind of a dream scenario, even a tragic scenario.
Right. So what about the 4K, like basically, up-resing it to 4K? What was the process regarding that? I mean,
well, fortunately, we got most of the footage we wanted before the COVID pandemic, but there was some reels that we would have gotten, had transferred to 4K, and then used some of them in the film that we could not get because just about the time we were finishing or we were wrapping up getting all the materials, the pandemic hit and the National Archives shut down. And we weren't going to use third generation copies or crap that's on YouTube or something like that.
Right.
So basically, we went with what we had. Unfortunately, we had a lot of 4K, and basically at that time you would ask the National Archives in Washington to through an outside vendor, they get it out, you arrange it, you pay for it, and then it gets done, and then you get shipped the hard drive. So and it makes a big difference for this footage, which was kind of revolutionary. Very little color footage. There are probably people watching this who might even be saying, when I come to think of it, I've never seen Hiroshima or Nagasaki footage in color.
Right.
I'd say, gee, I maybe I have, but I don't recall. And that's because it was, number one, it was very rare, and then number two, it was suppressed for 40 years. So I think the color footage is really in some ways quite shocking, just because partly because it is color, and people are just used to, like I said, these same kind of gray images of the aftermath.
Yeah, I mean, I admire, for me, the heroes are really archivists and people in library science. That they're the real heroes of this, and documenting everything and keeping preserving history. So, I mean, my final question, Greg, is like, what is your? I mean, this is again through your work through the anti-nuclear movement and whatnot. What is your kind of like, now that this film is out? Do you see this kind of like, in a way, life's work, like behind you, or what do you see Atomic Cover Up as a way to promote what you believe in?
Well, it's an important point, and what has driven me since the 1980s really is that a lot of people might say, well, what can you do about the bombing, or what you can't, people who died, you can't bring them back, you can't, it's over and done with. But the point is that not only do we still have tens of thousands of nuclear weapons in the world, we have new nuclear powers, and what a lot of people don't even know is that the U.S. still has a first use policy. It is official U.S. policy that the U.S. can and will use nuclear weapons first in an international conflict. It doesn't have to be after we were attacked, even with conventional weapons. it can be in response to a crisis, and we want to do a preemptive nuclear strike. So, it's called first use or first strike policy. And, some people got very excited or alarmed about it when Donald Trump was president. But, it came before him, and it's still in place today. And, we don't want to imagine a Dr. Strangelove scenario.
Right.
But you don't have to have a Dr. Strangelove scenario. It could be launched by by a U.S. president.
Sure.
So, and the fact is that in our media, in public officials, and even public opinion, to some extent, there still is this strong support for the use of the bombs in 1945. You've probably heard 100 times yourself. People will say, well, we should never use them again, but 1945 was different. So essentially, we've made 2 exceptions for the last 76 years. And when you're making exceptions, it's very easy to make them again or to cite them again. Or it's sort of embedded in the American consciousness that you can use nuclear weapons, even though people will deny it up and down. Well, no, we can never use nuclear weapons. They're too terrible to use. Well, we've used them twice, and you've defended it. and it's particularly appalling that the media always has a chance to reconsider or to give a more balanced look at it or be more critical of it, and they rarely do. So I feel like I've been up against this for decades now. But it's sort of also motivated, because you want to show people, okay, this is what happened. This is the excuses that were made at the time. This is the human effects. And you have to face this. And why did we cover it up for so long? What did we have to hide? Was it possible we didn't have to use them, or that the bomb was even worse than people thought? Why did we have to suppress it if it was something that we had to do, or it was basically a good thing? So anyway, that's my motivation, and I hope people who do see the film maybe take that message from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the old age adage is history repeats itself, and I think we're as a civilization we forget things and events and whatnot, and it's very important for the work that you do to have it out there and then remind us as a that this is not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, and that exceptions are exceptions. Like, there shouldn't be any exceptions. So thank you again, Greg, for making Atomic Cover Up. And yeah, especially Hawaii is in a sense the Pearl Harbor's here. We're like this is the major military front for the Pacific Rim. So
well, kind of amazingly, I was born on December 7th.
Oh wow.
Not 1941, but
right.
My birthday is December 7th. So
wow.
Take what you will. But
destiny, I don't know, but for your work, but it's truly an amazing piece of work that you've done.
I appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here because I know you have a great festival. I've followed it for some time. I know you have a great reputation. So I was very excited when the film was chosen for the Hawaii Festival. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely. So thank you again for watching the discussion today, and a special mahalo to all of our HIF sponsors, board of directors, and our HIF Ohana members. If you're able, please consider donating to HIF. Every dollar counts toward keeping HIF presenting great content like this in the future. Learn more and donate at hif.org/donate. And again, thank you, Greg, for joining us. And I hope people please buy tickets and watch Atomic Cover Up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.